This story took place many years ago in Alaska and has been shared online many times. Some people claim that it is not accurate, but other people think that the story is true. I believe each of our actions influences one another. Michael and Laura loved nature their entire lives. Immediately after their wedding, the young man got the opportunity to leave sunny Florida in order to work as a park ranger in the coldest U.S. state. The choice was obvious. Alaska greeted the couple with open arms. Their new life seemed like a fairy tale. Laura took care of the house while Michael patrolled the surrounding forest. They lived in a small wooden house about 30 kilometers from the nearest settlement. They had several neighbors whose jobs also involved protecting nature. Each morning, Michael left their home either on foot or on their snowmobile and came back home in the evening. His wife waited for him at the house. Time passed quickly. The clean, intoxicating air, white snow, and the abundance of wildlife all seemed like a fairy tale come to life. One day, however, something happened to the young couple, which made them look at everything that surrounded them differently. On one of the most ordinary and unremarkable days, Michael got everything he needed and headed to the forest. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. Laura watched her beloved leave and began to go about her business. The day flew by quickly when the woman noticed that it was already dark outside, and her husband still hadn't returned home. Bad thoughts started creeping in. This is not surprising, as there were a lot of wild animals in the area, and it is not good to be alone in the dark in the wilderness. At the same time, she tried to comfort herself with the thought that Michael could have stayed overnight in a cabin several kilometers from home, in which he sometimes stayed when he knew he would not be able to make it home by dark. That's why, when Michael didn't come home by nighttime, Laura went to bed relatively calm, knowing that her husband was most likely in safety. At that point, she couldn't have even imagined what she would soon have to live through. The next morning, the woman went to look for Michael, but to her surprise, he was neither at the cabin nor at his friends' houses. She spent all day walking all the familiar trails, but didn't see any tracks. Unfortunately, it also snowed all night long, which covered all possible clues. When she returned home in the evening, she did not see any lights in the windows, which could only mean one thing: Michael did not return home. It was the second night since he had disappeared, and Laura understood that he was most likely in trouble. She called the settlement and conveyed her fears in a trembling voice. The workers heard her story and said to wait until morning, because it was useless to begin the search at night time. In any case, no one was available to carry out the search at that hour. That evening, Laura was beside herself. She could not fall asleep and reproached herself for letting her husband go with the minimum supply of provisions. She hoped that he was simply stuck somewhere and tried to push away thoughts of the worst. At the same time, she understood that finding a person after 2 days in a snowy forest would not be an easy task. Considering the number and characteristics of the local animal population, Laura knew that every second mattered deeply. All night long, the woman sat by the fireplace, worried and unsure of what to do. And most likely, friends, this story would have added completely different ending if it wasn't for something that nobody expected. After having dozed off towards morning, Laura was suddenly awakened by a wolf's loud howl. She knew the sound well, because she often met these predators in Alaska. However, never before did they come so close to her house. On that day, the howl was right outside her window, which the woman found very alarming. Not only did Michael disappear, but the wolves began coming up to people. All this could only mean one thing: something terrible was happening. The howling did not subside. Without thinking twice, Laura picked up Michael's old gun in order to frighten off the uninvited guest. 6 months earlier, her husband taught her how to shoot, even though he never expected her to actually need to use a gun, but there was nothing else to do. The woman opened the window and fired into the air, after which the howling stopped. She put the heavy gun on the table and wanted to go back to bed, as she was exhausted. But when she heard a rustle at her door, maybe it was Michael, delighted, Laura rushed to the door. She grabbed her gun because she knew that the predator was likely still nearby. When she looked outside, the woman saw something that made her freeze in her tracks. Right outside her door stood a huge wolf that was looking straight into her eyes. She could not understand why it had come and what it wanted. She made a sound hoping to drive away the creature. It, however, did not leave, which was strange. Laura knew that this was not typical behavior for the animal, but it had obviously no intention to leave. Laura shot into the air. Once more, the wolf closed its eyes momentarily, but still did not budge. The desperate woman made a loud noise, and approached the animal with the gun in front of her. She expected the wolf to run away, but it only moved a little and turned back to look at her. It was as if the wolf wanted to tell her something. By that time, it was already light outside. The sun shone brightly over the horizon on that very cold morning. Laura began remembering peculiar stories that she heard about wolves, but she never believed them. But what brought the animal to her door? After all, there had to be a reason why it endured the gunshots and didn't run away from them. An inner voice told her that it was a message from above. Laura slowly walked towards the wolf, who kept its distance from her, and began heading towards the forest. The woman decided to follow the animal without really knowing why. The only thing that calmed her was the old gun in her hand. That's why she walked for some time. The wolf ran ahead, looking back at Laura all the time. The woman was using up her last strength to follow it. She was very tired and her hands were freezing, but the wolf was leading her into the thick of the forest. After about 20 minutes, the woman could no longer hold the gun in her hands. It was too heavy for her. Halfway through the walk, she also realized that she already fired 2 shots, which meant that she had no bullets left. Of course, the strange object in her hands could have an effect on the wolf, but something told her that the animal did not wish her harm. After all, why would it come to visit her alone without its pack? Laura was well aware of the fact that wolves usually hunt in packs. All this suggests only one thing. The predator had some kind of specific purpose. But what? At that point, she could not even imagine where the wolf was taking her. The wolf moved along hidden paths, and Laura could hardly keep up. Sometimes it disappeared from her field of vision and then reappeared again. The animal kept looking back at Laura. They walked in such a manner for several kilometers. The woman had absolutely no energy left, but when they came to a small clearing, she could not believe her eyes. In the distance, she saw the silhouette of a snowmobile on which Michael had left a few days prior. All the signs pointed to him being close by. So Laura ran towards the snowmobile as fast as she could. When she approached the machine, she heard screams and groans. It was the voice of her beloved. At first, she couldn't make out where it was coming from. However, when she came a little closer to a cliff, she saw her husband. As it turned out, Michael stumbled and simply slipped on ice and fell into a small gorge. He could not get out of there by himself and needed medical attention. But most importantly, Laura understood that her husband was still alive. In a trembling voice through her tears, Laura told Michael to hold on. She thought that she wouldn't need to leave him. Michael, however, told her that he still had energy and that she should leave him to call for help. Laura took the snowmobile, and an hour later, she reached a settlement. Several people set out to help Michael. 2 hours later, they lifted him out of the gorge with the help of ropes. He was then airlifted to the hospital. That evening, Michael found himself in safety. It turned out that both of his legs were broken, as were his ribs, because of the height of the fall. None of this mattered, however. What mattered was that his life was no longer in danger. After 3 weeks, Michael was discharged from the hospital and returned home. After 2 months, he was able to walk normally. But the most amazing thing still awaited the couple. When Michael came home, Laura told him the story of his rescue and who helped her find him. Of course, Michael did not believe her at first. Things like that just didn't happen, despite the incredible stories one hears about wolves. But after thinking about it some more, he decided to share with Laura an incident that took place a few weeks before his accident. Michael found an emaciated and freezing wolf cub on the road and decided to help the baby. He picked it up and followed the fresh wolf tracks to bring the cub to a wolf inn, which he saw nearby. When driving away, he caught a glimpse of a huge wolf behind a tree who followed him with its eyes. At that point, he had no idea that the wolf would soon repay him for his kindness. By the way, we don't know for certain that this was the same wolf. Maybe it was just a coincidence. We also don't know whether this story really did take place. Experts say that wild animals are capable of such things and much more. Oftentimes we simply underestimate them, thinking that they are incapable of such deed. It just so happened that in this case, a wolf saved the life of a person and thanked him for the rescue of her own baby. If you like the story, please share this story with your friends and family. Also subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss the video. Thank you.